You know what gets me? When somebody tells you straight up who they are and you're praying they'll change. February 5, 2020, somebody threw bricks through Anitra Gun's windows. Slashed all 4 of her tires while she was sleeping. 9 days later, on Valentine's Day, she was gone. Her phone started sending strange messages that morning. Messages that didn't sound like her. Messages asking for addresses she already knew. And a black Toyota with red stripes kept circling the block. 5, maybe 6 times. Her friend Scoot stood outside watching, writing down the license plate, texting back and forth with whoever had her phone. He said, "I don't know what y'all got going on, but I am not the one to be played with." The messages stopped. 4 days later, they found her body in the woods. Strangled. This is the story of Anitra Gun, a 23-year-old college senior who was about to graduate, about to start her life. But the person who claimed to love her had other plans. I'm bringing you this story today because we need to talk about what happened, how it happened, and why nobody could stop it even when the signs were right there. So let's talk about Anitra Gun. Let's talk about who she was before any of this happened, because that matters. Anitra Lache Gun was born November 6, 1997, in Camp Hill, Alabama. She grew up in Atlanta, raised by her father Christopher Gun after her mother, Melissa Shearhouse, passed away in a car accident back in 2014. Anitra was just a teenager when she lost her mom. That kind of loss changes you. Her father would later say she became the center of his world after that. His pride and joy. She had 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. Her brother Antoine remembered her as the peacemaker of the family. The one who could walk into any situation and calm it down. Always smiling, always in a good mood. He said she could sing anything, especially gospel songs. Said her voice was angelic. Anitra went to Westlake High School in Atlanta, graduated in 2016, and then headed to Fort Valley State University. FVSU is a historically black college in Fort Valley, Georgia, about 100 miles south of Atlanta. She enrolled to study agriculture because she wanted to be a veterinarian. She had this deep love for animals. Her friends said if she saw an animal on the side of the road in distress, she'd stop everything to help it. At Fort Valley, Anitra stayed busy. Full-time student, part-time server at a restaurant called 1836 Restaurant and Lounge. She sang in the school's concert and gospel choirs. People who knew her said she had this way of making everyone around her feel special. One friend told reporters, she was always there for everyone else. By early 2020, Anitra was in her senior year, just months away from graduating. She had job interviews lined up. She was looking at her future, ready to step into everything she'd worked for. 23 years old, standing at the edge of all that possibility. But there was something else going on in her life. Something that had started out feeling like love and had slowly turned into something else entirely. In 2019, Anitra met a young man named DeMarcus Little. They met through mutual friends, and by fall of that year they were spending a lot of time together. DeMarcus was 22 years old, an Army sergeant stationed at Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia, about 3 hours east of Fort Valley. He worked as a unit supply specialist and had joined the military back in 2016. To his family, DeMarcus was a disciplined young man, respectful, dependable. His stepmother would later describe him with one word, love man. She said he'd made sergeant in just 3 years, had no criminal record, nothing on his background. His family said he was humble, went to church, sang in the choir. They were proud of him. But Anitra's friends? They saw something different. By September 2019, just a few months into the relationship, there were already problems. Text messages recovered later showed arguments, accusations, manipulation. In November, Anitra sent him a message saying they should stop speaking because every time they talked, she felt manipulated. But DeMarcus didn't let go easily. Court records showed he would accuse her of being with other men. He'd send threatening messages. In one message, he threatened to harm himself if she ended things. When she didn't respond fast enough, he'd go silent for hours, making her worry. Then he'd come back saying his attempt didn't work, but that his manipulation did. And just like that, the line of communication would open back up. On Anitra's birthday in November 2019, DeMarcus told her he was sparing the man he thought she was going out with that night. Keep in mind, they'd already broken up by this point. But he was still monitoring her, still making threats. He even sent her a screenshot of a message he'd written to somebody, offering them $200 to harm her date. Then he told her, "We're going to have problems if you go out with him." On my mama. When he accused her of texting another man, he told her, "My mercy has limits." Now, Anitra wasn't hiding from him completely. She tried to distance herself, but then he'd find a way back in. It's that cycle a lot of people don't understand until they're in it. You think you're out, you think you're done, and then something pulls you back. Maybe it's the apology. Maybe it's the promise to change. Maybe it's just exhaustion from fighting. Her best friend Sierra Stewart wasn't a fan of DeMarcus. She told police their relationship was unstable, that it was trouble. She saw what it was doing to Anitra. But there was also another person in Anitra's life around this time. A young man named David Howard. Everybody called him Scoot. Scoot was 21 years old, a barber who worked across the street from the restaurant where Anitra served tables. He lived with his family just a few doors down from Anitra's place on West Church Street. They'd only known each other about 9 days by the time Valentine's Day came around. Scoot described it as casual. They'd hung out a couple times, been intimate once, but Anitra had friend-zoned him after that. She told him she wasn't looking for a relationship, that she was working on herself. They both agreed to just be friends. Scoot said the last time he physically saw Anitra was Wednesday night, February 12th. He'd gone over to her place, they talked, and eventually he fell asleep there. Around 4 a.m., they were jolted awake by a loud crash. Anitra thought maybe her dog had knocked something over, so she went to check. Didn't see anything unusual. They went back to sleep. A couple hours later, around 7 a.m., Scoot was leaving through the back door when he noticed shattered glass on the kitchen floor. Somebody had thrown a brick through the back window. When he stepped outside to the carport where Anitra's car was parked, he saw all 4 tires had been slashed. Scoot went back inside and told Anitra. She seemed confused, said she had no idea who would do that. After Scoot left and walked home, Anitra called the police to report the damage. When officers asked if she knew who might be responsible, she said she didn't know. But this wasn't the first time her tires had been slashed. It had happened before. DeMarcus Little would eventually admit to police that he was the one who threw those bricks and slashed those tires on February 5th. He said he'd reacted in rage when he found out Anitra had a man staying overnight at her place. So that's where things stood going into Valentine's Day 2020. Anitra had an ex-boyfriend who'd already shown he was willing to destroy her property when he got angry. She had a new friend who she was trying to keep at arm's length. And she was trying to focus on finishing school and moving forward with her life. February 13th, the night before Valentine's Day, Anitra went to a house party with a couple of girlfriends. DeMarcus and some of his friends were there too. Even though Anitra had gone to the party with someone else, she ended up leaving with DeMarcus, his friend Javon Abram, and one of her girlfriends, Tracy King. The group went back to DeMarcus' place for a few hours. Then, sometime after 2 a.m., Javon dropped Anitra and DeMarcus off at her house on West Church Street so she could get her car. After that, the couple went to Waffle House. They stayed there about 30 minutes, until around 2:30 a.m. on Valentine's Day morning. From Waffle House, they drove to the home of DeMarcus' aunt on Chestnut Hill Road. The aunt, who worked the night shift as a nurse, came home around 3:35 a.m. and saw Anitra standing at the door with DeMarcus. Anitra's white 2013 Chevy Cruze was parked outside. According to DeMarcus, that was the last normal night they spent together. He told police they went inside, spent the night, and woke up the next morning. He said Anitra left around 11:30 a.m. on Valentine's Day, telling him she had a job interview. Here's the thing though. Anitra did have a job interview scheduled for 9:30 a.m. that morning. If she left at 11:30 like DeMarcus claimed, she would have already been 2 hours late. She never made it to that interview. And she never made it home. What happened instead was a series of strange text messages that started going out from Anitra's phone early that morning. Messages that didn't sound like her. Messages that made the people who knew her start to panic. Around 8:30 a.m., Scoot started getting texts from Anitra's number. Remember, Scoot lived just a few doors down from her. He'd left his business phone at her place a couple days earlier and needed it for work, so he'd messaged asking if she could look for it. The response he got back was weird. The person texting said to send his location and they'd drive over to him. Scoot told detectives later, "I can stand at the end of my driveway and see her front door. She knows where I live. She doesn't need to drive." When he tried calling, nobody picked up. Then he got a message saying, "I can't talk right now. What's up?" He replied saying he needed his phone. A few minutes later, another text, "I'm about to head your way." Then just after 11 a.m. came the breakup message. "We can no longer be together. It was fun while it lasted. So don't come to my house." Scoot testified later about receiving that message. The prosecutor asked him, "Does it look like she's trying to break up with you?" Scoot said, "Yeah, like we go together, but it wasn't like that." He told the person on the other end, "I don't know what y'all got going on, but I am not the one to be played with." Then came another message asking for his address again, saying they were on their way to bring him his phone and he should wait out front. By this time, Scoot was standing outside under his carport, cutting a client's hair. And that's when he noticed the car. A black 2019 Toyota Corolla with red pinstripes, circling his block 5 times, maybe 6. Scoot could see there was only one person inside. A man, not Anitra. He wrote down the license plate number and immediately reached out to Anitra's best friend Sierra on Snapchat. Told her about the strange messages and sent her the plate number. When police later ran that plate, it came back registered to DeMarcus Little. While Scoot was dealing with those bizarre texts, Sierra Stewart was having her own strange morning. She'd woken up late to a series of messages from Anitra's phone. At first they were normal. Happy Valentine's Day greetings back and forth. But then the messages shifted. Anitra's phone was talking about hooking up with someone, just calling him dude, saying she was about to meet up with him. Sierra knew Anitra had been in an on and off thing with DeMarcus, but this message made it sound like it was someone else entirely. Sierra was supportive. She wasn't a fan of DeMarcus anyway. But as the hours went by with no real contact from Anitra, Sierra started getting worried. By midday on Valentine's Day, Sierra got a call from Scoot asking if she'd heard from Anitra. He told her about the weird messages he'd been getting too. He also mentioned that DeMarcus claimed he was no longer with Anitra and had no idea where she was. Something wasn't right. Sierra called Christopher Gun in Atlanta, Anitra's father. Told him nobody could reach his daughter. Now, Christopher and Anitra were close. After losing his wife, Anitra's mother, back in 2014, Christopher had raised Anitra and her siblings as a single father. They talked regularly. She always stayed in contact. So when Christopher tried calling Anitra that Valentine's Day morning to wish her happy Valentine's Day and got no answer, he wasn't immediately alarmed. She was probably busy, he thought. But as the day went on and the calls kept going to voicemail, he started to worry. After Sierra called him, Christopher reached out to Anitra's landlord and asked him to do a welfare check at her house on West Church Street. The landlord went over, let himself in. The house was tidy. No obvious signs of a struggle. But there was one strange detail. Anitra's dog wasn't in its crate. Normally, when Anitra left the house, she'd secure the dog. This time it was just roaming free. The landlord called Christopher back with that information. Christopher immediately contacted Fort Valley Police. When officers arrived at Anitra's house, they didn't find anything alarming at first. No signs of forced entry, no blood, nothing broken. They figured it was probably just miscommunication. Maybe she'd stayed with a friend and forgotten to call home. But Anitra's car, that white 2013 Chevy Cruze, was also missing. And by the end of that Valentine's Day, the messages from Anitra's phone had completely stopped. The last texts to Scoot were around 11:30 a.m. messages to Sierra between 10 and 11 a.m. After that, silence. Friends and family kept texting, kept calling. No responses. February 15th came and went. Still no word. Christopher Gun couldn't take it anymore. On February 15th, he drove from Atlanta to Fort Valley, about 100 miles, with Anitra's brother Antoine. When they got to her house and knocked, nobody answered. The car was still gone. Christopher called DeMarcus. DeMarcus, who'd been in town visiting, met up with Christopher and Antoine. He seemed worried too, asking what could have happened to her. At that point, it had been more than 24 hours since anyone had actually heard from Anitra. Christopher went to the Fort Valley police station and filed an official missing persons report. While Christopher was at the station, DeMarcus, Antoine, and DeMarcus' friend Javon went out searching. And then, supposedly, DeMarcus found Anitra's car. It was just 2 blocks away from her house, parked in a neighbor's yard. The front bumper was completely ripped off. The car was covered in mud and debris, scratches on the sides like it had been driven through rough terrain. When police arrived to process the vehicle, they found Anitra's purse inside. Her wallet with all her money and credit cards still in it. Her keys. The only thing missing? Her cell phone. Now, when somebody's car is found abandoned with their belongings still inside but their phone gone, that immediately changes the whole situation. Police knew something was wrong. They started questioning people close to Anitra, trying to establish a timeline. And naturally, their attention turned to DeMarcus Little. He was her ex-boyfriend. He'd been with her the night before she disappeared. He was supposedly the last person to see her alive. When investigators brought DeMarcus in for questioning, he was cooperative at first. He corrected them when they called him her boyfriend, saying they were actually exes and that the relationship had been on and off for a while. He walked them through the night of February 13th going into Valentine's Day morning. Said they'd run into each other at a party, spent the evening together, went to Waffle House around 2 a.m., then went back to his aunt's house on Chestnut Hill Road. He said they spent the night together. Woke up the next morning. And Anitra left around 11:30 a.m., telling him she had a job interview. Investigators confirmed parts of his story with his aunt. She verified that when she came home from her nursing shift around 3:35 a.m., she saw Anitra at the door with DeMarcus. She saw Anitra's car parked outside. The next morning when she left for work, the car was still there. But when she came home that afternoon, it was gone. So according to this timeline, DeMarcus and his aunt were the last people to see Anitra before she vanished. Investigators also talked to Javon Abram, DeMarcus' close friend. Javon confirmed he'd been at the party on February 13th and had given DeMarcus and Anitra a ride earlier in the night. But when they asked him about Valentine's Day, Javon didn't have much to say. At least not yet. Meanwhile, a task force was formed. Fort Valley Police, Peach County Sheriff's Office, Fort Valley State University Police, Bibb County District Attorney's Office, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation all came together. Even Georgia State Patrol sent helicopters to search the area from the air. On February 17th, Fort Valley State University released a statement urging anyone with information to come forward. The campus community was shaken. This wasn't just some student who'd missed a few classes. This was one of their own. A young woman known for her smile, her voice, her kindness. Christopher Gunn released his own statement that day, saying it was out of character for his daughter not to be in touch. He pleaded for anyone who knew anything to speak up. The community rallied. Volunteers started searching. Flyers went up all over Fort Valley. Vigils were planned. Students at FVSU organized their own search parties, walking through wooded areas, checking abandoned buildings, anywhere Anitra might be. But as Monday turned into Tuesday, hope was starting to collide with fear. And then, on Tuesday, February 18th, at 3:19 in the afternoon, a Peach County Sheriff's deputy made a discovery that confirmed everyone's worst nightmare. The deputy had been patrolling the area near the Peach-Crawford County line. Weather had been bad that day, keeping the helicopters grounded, so deputies were searching on foot and by car. They'd been looking specifically for areas with the kind of brush and debris that had been found stuck in Anitra's car. The deputy noticed a path leading off the main roadway on Greer Road. It looked like a vehicle had recently driven down it, scraping trees and disturbing the vegetation. He got out of his car and walked down the path. About 150 yards into the woods, he found part of a car bumper. The front bumper from a 2013 white Chevy Cruze. And right next to it, covered lightly with tree branches and brush, he found the body of a young woman. Anitra Gun had been found. Peach County Sheriff Terry Dees held a press conference that afternoon. A reporter asked, "Do you have any persons of interest?" Sheriff Dees said,
"Very close to part of that front bumper."
Do you have any persons of interest?
I think it's pretty common sense who our person of interest is.
Can you say it
And
though
who
out
is
loud?
that?
It's the boyfriend. I mean, we've talked to him 3 times.
The cause of death, manual strangulation. There were also signs that Anitra had been struck at least once in the head, and that her body had likely been dragged to the position where it was found. She'd been left there like she was nothing. Like her life didn't matter. 5 miles from her home, in a shallow grave that wasn't even deep enough to really hide her. For Christopher Gunn, the news was devastating. He'd been hoping, praying she'd be found alive. Now he had to prepare to bury his daughter. For the Fort Valley community, it was a gut punch. Students at FVSU held memorials. They wore purple ribbons for domestic violence awareness. They cried together, held each other, tried to make sense of something that made no sense. And for investigators, the case had officially shifted from a missing person to a homicide. On February 19th, just one day after Anitra's body was found, DeMarcus Little was arrested. But here's the thing. He wasn't charged with murder. Not yet. He was arrested for the February 5th incident. Criminal damage to property. The slashed tires and the bricks through the windows. During his arraignment for that charge, DeMarcus' family was there supporting him. His stepmother spoke to reporters outside the courthouse. She said, "It just hurt me to see him come in and shackled like that, like he's a criminal. My son's never done anything wrong. He didn't do this incident. I can sympathize with the family, I truly do. I have daughters. I even have one in college. And if something like that happened to her, I would be devastated. But my son didn't do this. He was raised the right way. He's not violent. Never been in a fight. Never had any criminal background. He's a good kid, a good soldier serving our country proudly." A reporter asked, "Does it annoy you that he's a person of interest?" His stepmother replied, "It mostly annoys me how certain media and social media and certain people in society have destroyed him and slandered his name. They don't really know the real DeMarcus Little. The real DeMarcus Little is a very humble young man. He made sergeant in 3 years in the United States Army. He doesn't have anything on his background, any blemishes, nothing. Nobody can't say nothing bad about my son. He's been here on this earth 22 years and can't no one say anything terrible about my son." DeMarcus was offered a $10,000 bond and release with an ankle monitor for the property damage charge. But before he could post bond and walk out of that jail, he was hit with a murder charge. Malice murder. And he wasn't alone. His friend Javon Abram was arrested too. 2 counts of giving false statements to law enforcement and 1 count of concealing a death. See, what investigators had discovered was that Javon knew a whole lot more than he'd been saying. It took a couple of interviews, but eventually Javon broke. On February 26th, detectives brought him in for a 3rd round of questioning. And this time, the weight of what he knew became too much to carry. Javon told them that on Sunday, February 16th, 2 days after Anitra disappeared, he and DeMarcus had left church together and gone for a drive. While they were in the car, DeMarcus confessed. Detective Nunez asked Javon what DeMarcus told him. Javon said, I was talking to, like, trying to tell her how I feel about, how much I love her and stuff. He was like, she ended up laughing in my face and he was like, I don't know what happened. Blacked out and I got her. Then he was like, when he was after that, like he just grabbed her and started choking. At one point she just stopped fighting. So he felt like she had wanted to be home or she wanted to go where I want. So he knew. The prosecutor clarified during trial. He told you that he had poured his heart out after that, right? Yes. And that she laughed at that? Yes. And that he had hit her and that he started to choke her and that she fought at first? Correct. And then he said to you then it looked like she just gave up because she wanted to be with her mother, and that's her mother who's dead? Yes. According to Javon, DeMarcus said he'd been pouring his heart out to Anitra that morning at his aunt's house, telling her they were soulmates, how much he loved her. And she laughed at him. That rejection, that humiliation sent him into a rage. He claimed he blacked out, hit her, then grabbed her and choked her. Javon said DeMarcus told him that Anitra fought back at first but then stopped. And in DeMarcus' twisted mind, he thought she'd given up because she wanted to be with her mother in heaven. After ending her life, DeMarcus said he put her body in the trunk of her car and drove out toward Crawford County. The terrain was rough. The front bumper fell off. He left her body in the woods, drove back to Fort Valley and parked her car a few blocks from her house. From there he called Javon for a ride. This was the moment when Javon picked him up and DeMarcus pointed out Anitra's car, the white Chevy Cruze with the missing bumper. Javon had asked, "Isn't that Anitra's car?" DeMarcus blew him off. Said, "Of course it's not." But DeMarcus kept Anitra's cell phone with him that morning. That's why Scoot was getting those strange messages while a black Toyota with red stripes circled his block. DeMarcus was the one texting from her phone, trying to figure out who this other guy was, where he lived, what he looked like. Later, DeMarcus disposed of the phone in a drainage pipe on Carver Drive. On February 16th, the day DeMarcus confessed to Javon, he took his friend out to Greer Road at the county line to show him where Anitra's body was. Javon said when they got there, he saw her. He was in shock. He refused to get out of the vehicle. DeMarcus retrieved part of the Chevy Cruze's front bumper that was sitting nearby and asked Javon to help him push it into the trunk. Javon described it during his testimony at trial. The prosecutor asked, "And what did he do with it?" Javon demonstrated, "He kept smashing like, you know." He said, "Javon, if you don't help me, bro," and you said, "He didn't have to. Did you help push that bumper for DeMarcus?" Javon nodded. They drove the bumper further out and dumped it in a ditch off another roadway. That piece of the bumper was eventually found exactly where Javon said it would be. But it wasn't just Javon's testimony that sealed the case. There was also cell phone location data. Both Javon's phone and DeMarcus' phone showed their movements that day, and the data lined up perfectly with Javon's version of events. More importantly, DeMarcus' phone data placed him traveling from his aunt's house on Chestnut Hill Road to the woods off Greer Road on Valentine's Day, right around the time Anitra would have been taken from this earth. When DeMarcus eventually went to trial in March 2022, more than 2 years after Anitra's death, Assistant District Attorney Don Baskin absolutely grilled him on the stand about those phone records. Baskin asked, "So every single cell location that we just talked about accurately showed where you were?" DeMarcus said, "Yes, ma'am." "So those same cell locations show at 103 you driving on Tanglewood Road headed toward Greer Road. Is that correct?" No. Your phone went offline at that point. I know where I was." "And then those same cell locations, which were right from noon until 1 o'clock and from 2:20 for the rest of the day, they then show you in the woods off Greer Road." "Correct." "No, they don't show you there. I wasn't in the woods. That wasn't my question. My question was, do those cell locations which you just testified were absolutely accurate with regards to your whereabouts between 12 and 1 and 2:20 to the rest of the night? Those same cell locations show you in the woods off Greer Road, don't they?" "Those are inaccurate." "Just those?" "Yes. Your phone shows you going from 420 Chestnut Hill Road to the woods off of Greer Road. Isn't that what happened, sir?" "No." "And you got back in Anitra's car and you drove it over ditches and trees, causing the bumper to fall off, causing everything else to break apart. And you dumped your soulmate like garbage in the middle of the woods, didn't you, sir?" "No." "Just like your phone said you did." "No, ma'am." "And then you drove back down in her beat-up car with the missing bumper and the missing wheel well. And you dumped her car just like you dumped her at the corner of Bell and Monterey. Didn't you, sir?" "No, ma'am." "Just like your phone said you did." "No, ma'am." "So your phone is lying." DeMarcus had no good answer for that. His timeline completely fell apart when prosecutors asked him where he was later that morning on February 14th. At first, he told police he was at home around 11:30 a.m. when Anitra left. But his own messages to Sierra at that time said he was out looking for Anitra. And Scoot had spotted his car circling the block in Fort Valley around the same time. The prosecutor asked, "What were you doing driving in your car, circling the block around where David Howard lived between 11:30 and 12:15? "I told you before." "What?" "She left you 15 minutes before. Because I wanted to see this dude." "So when Anitra left, you followed her?" "I don't remember." "Isn't that right, isn't it? You've just told the jury a few minutes ago that you were actually just hanging out at the house." "That didn't answer my question, sir. My question to you was, what did you do between 11 a.m. and 12:15? "I can't remember that." "You can't remember what you were doing." "I was at the house." "Okay. And so when you say, 'I'll be back,' you actually did leave the house then, correct?" "Okay. And you did get in your car and you did drive repeatedly by David Howard's address." "Correct. That address I drove around the location." "And you were doing that with Anitra's phone." "Correct." "Yes. That's weird because Anitra was texting David Howard at the exact same time you were driving around asking where he is and what he looks like. You know, weird. It's like a coincidence. That's what we used before. You ever heard the old saying, the simplest explanation is, the truth? Everything DeMarcus said on that stand contradicted the evidence. His phone didn't lie. The witnesses didn't lie. The forensic evidence didn't lie. The only person lying was him. The trial lasted about a week. The prosecution called witness after witness. Scoot testified about the strange messages. Sierra testified about the toxic relationship. Javon testified about the confession and being forced to help hide evidence. Forensic experts presented the cell phone data, the DNA evidence from both vehicles, the fingerprints and palm prints found in and on Anitra's car. The defense tried their best. DeMarcus attorney Benjamin Davis argued that DeMarcus wasn't the kind of person who could commit this act. He was an upstanding soldier, humble, serving his country. He had no criminal record. But prosecutor Neil Halverson painted a very different picture. He described a relationship that had become toxic, filled with control, threats, manipulation, and possessiveness on DeMarcus' part. Days of trial were spent reading through text messages exchanged between DeMarcus and Anitra in the months leading up to her death. In those messages, Anitra described DeMarcus as an evil, manipulative person. She wrote that she was tired of his threats and what he was putting her through. She tried over and over to distance herself from him, but he kept working his way back in. His messages repeatedly accused her of being with another man. On November 1st, Anitra wrote that they should stop speaking altogether because every time they talked, she ended up being manipulated. Days later, DeMarcus threatened to harm himself, blamed her for pushing him to that point, then went silent for hours while Anitra reached out, worried about his welfare. Eventually, he replied saying his attempt didn't work, but his manipulation did. And just like that, within days they were talking again. When Anitra's birthday came around in November, DeMarcus told her he was sparing the man he believed she was going out with that night. Even though they'd broken up, he still felt entitled to control who she spent time with. He sent her that screenshot showing he'd offered someone $200 to harm her date. Told her, "We're going to have problems if you go out with him. On my mama." When he accused her of texting another man, he said, "My mercy has limits." These weren't empty threats. This was a pattern of escalating behavior. And it all led to Valentine's Day 2020. After hearing all the evidence, all the testimony, all the contradictions in DeMarcus' story, the jury deliberated for about 3 hours. They had 3 counts to consider: malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. Malice murder means you ended someone's life with intent, with malice aforethought. Felony murder means you ended someone's life while committing another felony, even if you didn't necessarily plan it. In Georgia, both charges can carry the same sentence: life without parole. When the jury came back, the 4-person stood up. Count 1, malice murder. We the jury find DeMarcus Devontae Little not guilty. There was a stir in the courtroom. But then, for count 2, felony murder, we the jury find DeMarcus Devontae Little guilty. Count 3, aggravated assault. We the jury find DeMarcus Devontae Little guilty. Guilty. Anitra's family broke down. Tears of relief, tears of grief, tears of exhaustion from carrying this weight for more than 2 years. DeMarcus showed little emotion, but you could see it in his eyes. The reality was sinking in. After the verdict, Assistant District Attorney Don Baskin spoke publicly about the case. He talked about the concerns the prosecution had during jury selection. There was worry that some jurors might struggle to understand why Anitra kept going back to DeMarcus despite his increasingly volatile behavior. Baskin described it like a frog in a pot of slowly boiling water. If you throw a frog into boiling water, it'll jump right out. But if you put it in cool water and slowly turn up the heat, it doesn't realize it's in danger until it's too late. He said, "The picture that we wanted to paint was that despite the frustrating nature of domestic violence, especially from those of us that are sitting on the outside, that is to never give up, to keep fighting, to remind the individual who's in the cycle that they're in a dangerous pot of water and that it's going to come to a boil. That's real. That's the truth a lot of people don't want to accept. When you're on the outside looking in, it's easy to say, why didn't she just leave? But when you're in it, when you're dealing with the manipulation, the threats, the cycle of apologies and promises, it's not that simple." Anitra tried to leave. Multiple times. She told him in November they needed to stop talking. But he pulled her back in with threats of harming himself, with declarations of love, with making her feel guilty. And when she finally seemed to be moving on, when she was focusing on school and spending time with new friends, that's when he couldn't take it anymore. The state requested the only sentence they felt was appropriate: life without the possibility of parole. The judge agreed. In March 2022, DeMarcus Little was sentenced to spend the rest of his natural life in prison. He'll never walk free again. He'll never serve his country again. He'll never have the future his family believed he deserved. And Anitra? She'll never graduate from Fort Valley State. She'll never become the veterinarian she dreamed of being. She'll never help another animal on the side of the road. She'll never sing another gospel song. She'll never make her father proud by walking across that stage. Christopher Gun lost his daughter. After losing his wife years earlier, Anitra had become the center of his world. And now she was gone too. Her brother Antoine lost his sister, the peacemaker who could calm any situation. Her friends lost someone who was always there for everyone else. Fort Valley State lost a student who made people feel special just by being in the room. All because one man couldn't handle rejection. Now let's talk about what this case teaches us, because there are lessons here that we need to carry forward. First lesson, believe people when they tell you who they are. Anitra knew who DeMarcus was. She told her friends he was manipulative. She wrote it in text messages. She tried to get away from him. But he kept pulling her back in and she kept hoping he'd change. How many times do we see this? Somebody shows you exactly who they are through their actions, and we convince ourselves that maybe they'll be different this time. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they were just having a bad day. When somebody damages your property in anger, that's not a bad day. That's not a moment of frustration. That's a message. That's a threat. That's somebody showing you they're willing to destroy what's yours when they don't get what they want. Second lesson, the warning signs are usually there before things escalate to the worst outcome. DeMarcus didn't just wake up on Valentine's Day and decide to do what he did. This was escalation. It started with controlling behavior, moved to accusations and threats, then to property destruction, and finally to taking her life. Research shows that leaving a harmful relationship is often the most dangerous time. The risk increases significantly when someone tries to leave. Why? Because the person realizes they're losing control, and some would rather end someone's life than let them go. That's not love. That's possession. That's ownership. That's treating another human being like property. Third lesson, we have to create spaces where people feel safe enough to ask for help. Anitra had friends who could see what was happening. She had a father who loved her deeply, but she still went back to DeMarcus multiple times. Why? Maybe she felt ashamed. Maybe she thought she could fix him. Maybe she was scared of what he'd do if she involved authorities. Maybe she didn't want to be seen as weak or as someone who couldn't handle her own problems. We have to stop judging people for staying in harmful situations and start asking ourselves what we can do to make it easier for them to leave. That means believing them when they say someone is hurting them. That means offering support without conditions. That means understanding that leaving isn't always as simple as walking out the door. Fourth lesson, men, we have to do better. We have to be honest with ourselves about how we handle rejection, how we handle our emotions, how we treat the women in our lives. There's this idea that's been passed down for generations that if you love someone hard enough, if you show them how much you care, they'll eventually love you back. And when that doesn't happen, some men feel like they've been cheated out of something they're owed. But love isn't transactional. You can't force somebody to feel what you feel. And when they don't, that's not betrayal. That's just life. DeMarcus said Anitra laughed when he poured his heart out. Even if that's true, even if she did laugh, does that justify what he did? Does that make it okay to take her life? No, never. We have to teach young men that rejection isn't the end of the world. That your value doesn't come from whether someone wants to be with you. That your ego is not more important than someone else's life. And we have to teach them early before they grow up thinking control equals love. Fifth lesson, we have to stop making excuses for people just because they seem good on paper. DeMarcus' family talked about how he had no criminal record, how he was a sergeant in the army, how he went to church and sang in the choir. None of that means he wasn't capable of harm. Harmful behavior doesn't have a look. It doesn't have a resume. Some of the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most respectable in public. They know how to put on a good face for the world while terrorizing someone when nobody's watching. We saw this same pattern with Javon. He was DeMarcus' friend, someone who probably thought he knew him well. But when DeMarcus confessed to taking Anitra's life, Javon was terrified. He said during his testimony that he was scared for his own life, that he thought if he made the wrong move, he'd be in danger too. That fear is real. That fear kept him quiet for days while Anitra's family searched and hoped. Was Javon wrong for not coming forward immediately? Absolutely. But fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. And DeMarcus used that fear to keep him quiet. Eventually, Javon's conscience won. He couldn't carry that weight anymore. And his testimony became the key piece that helped convict DeMarcus. Javon was charged with concealing a death and making false statements. He took accountability for his part in this tragedy. And his decision to finally tell the truth helped bring some measure of justice for Anitra. But here's what stays with me about this case. Anitra Gun was 23 years old. She'd already survived the loss of her mother as a teenager. She'd worked hard to get into college to build a future for herself. She was months away from graduating. She had dreams. She had goals. She had people who loved her. And none of that mattered to DeMarcus in that moment when his pride was hurt, when he felt rejected, when he decided that if he couldn't have her, nobody could. That's the reality of intimate partner violence. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your potential. It doesn't care about the people who love you. It's about power and control. And when that control is threatened, some people choose devastation over letting go. Anitra's story is not unique. Research shows that about 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. Every year, intimate partner violence accounts for a significant portion of all violent crime in the United States. But beyond the statistics, beyond the numbers, there are real people. Daughters, sons, mothers, fathers, friends. People with futures that got cut short. People whose families have to live with the weight of that loss every single day. Christopher Gun will never walk his daughter down the aisle. He'll never hold her children. He'll never see her become the veterinarian she dreamed of being. Antoine will never have another conversation with his sister, the peacemaker who could calm any storm. Sierra will never get another phone call from her best friend. All of that was stolen. Not by some stranger, not by some random act of violence, but by someone who claimed to love her. If you're in a relationship right now and you're seeing these signs, controlling behavior, constant accusations, threats when you try to leave, someone monitoring your phone or your movements, someone isolating you from friends and family, someone who's destroyed your property or threatened to harm themselves if you leave, please understand, it doesn't get better on its own. It escalates. And if you're on the outside watching someone you love go through this, don't give up on them. Don't judge them for staying. Keep the door open. Keep reminding them that they deserve better. Keep letting them know you're there when they're ready. Because sometimes all it takes is one person believing in them, one person offering a safe space, one person refusing to turn their back, for them to finally find the strength to leave. Anitra tried. She really did try. And it cost her everything. The least we can do is honor her memory by learning from what happened, by speaking up when we see these patterns, by refusing to stay silent when someone we love is in danger. Her voice was taken from her on February 14, 2020, but her story is still being told. And maybe, just maybe, her story will save somebody else's life. Rest in peace, Anitra Lache Gun. You deserved so much more than what you got. You deserve to graduate, to follow your dreams, to live a long and happy life surrounded by people who truly loved you the right way. Your father loved you. Your brother loved you. Your friends loved you. Your community loved you. And we won't forget you. To everyone watching, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. You can also text STAR to 88788 for help. You don't have to face this alone. There are people who want to help. There are people who believe you. There are people who understand. And your life is worth fighting for. This has been Unseen Stories. Thank you for being here with me today as we remembered Anitra and talked about these difficult but necessary truths. Stay safe out there. Look out for each other. And never be afraid to speak up when something doesn't feel right. Peace.